Every government in the modern world claims it can create prosperity. They call it stimulus, quantitative easing, fiscal expansion. They print trillions, promising growth, stability, and recovery. But if nations can print their way to wealth, why do citizens keep getting poorer? If money creation truly made everyone richer, then no one would struggle. Every crisis could be solved with ink, paper, or now a few keystrokes on a central bank's computer. And yet, while governments boast of record GDPs and economic growth, ordinary people face record debt, rising prices, and stagnant wages. So what went wrong? This is the story of how the illusion of wealth became the new form of poverty, and how every empire that tried to print its way to prosperity ended up devouring its own people. The story begins centuries ago when money was something tangible, gold, silver, or goods. Value was tied to something real, something scarce. Governments could not simply create it, but kings and rulers quickly discovered a problem. Real wealth is slow. You have to mine gold, grow crops, or build trade networks to expand it. And so began the oldest trick in the book, debasement. In ancient Rome, emperors reduced the silver content in coins to mint more money. They used the same metal to fund wars and buy loyalty, and for a while it worked, till one day people noticed. Prices soared, savings vanished, and Rome's once mighty currency became worthless. The empire didn't collapse overnight. It rotted from within, as inflation ate away at the citizens' real wealth. That same pattern would repeat across centuries, from the Ming Dynasty to revolutionary France. Every time rulers created artificial money, the short-term illusion of prosperity ended in long-term decline. Fast forward to the 18th and 19th centuries, the birth of paper money. Governments discovered that instead of melting metals, they could print promises. Paper notes were easier to produce and far easier to manipulate. During wars, nations printed money to fund armies. During recessions, they printed money to fund jobs. Each time, they promised it was temporary. But each time, the printing expanded permanently. By the early 20th century, the printing press had turned into a weapon of policy. In Weimar, Germany, 1923, the government printed to pay its debts and support post-war recovery. The result? A loaf of bread that once cost 250 marks suddenly cost 200 billion marks. Citizens carried money in wheelbarrows but couldn't afford food. The lesson should have been clear. Printing wealth doesn't create prosperity. It destroys trust. But instead of learning, the world re-engineered the process on a grander scale. After World War II, the world adopted the Bretton Woods system, a global framework where all currencies were pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar was backed by gold. It was meant to restore discipline, a promise that money would again represent value. But as decades passed, even the United States couldn't resist the temptation. Wars in Vietnam, social programs, and global ambitions demanded more spending than gold could support. So in 1971, President Richard Nixon made a historic announcement. The US would no longer exchange dollars for gold. Money was now fiat-backed not by metal, but by belief. From that moment, every major currency on Earth became debt-based. Governments could now print at will, and central banks could create new money without restraint. The gold standard was gone, and the age of unlimited credit had begun. At first, it seemed like a miracle. Economies boomed, trade flourished, and markets soared. But behind the boom, something changed. The newly created money didn't flow equally. It went first to governments, corporations, and the wealthy, those closest to the source. By the time it reached the public, prices had already risen. This is what economists call the Cantillon effect, the hidden inequality of money creation. Every printed dollar made the rich richer and the poor poorer. In the 1980s and 1990s, financialization replaced production as the engine of growth. Manufacturing moved overseas. Speculation became a national sport. And real wages stagnated, even as asset prices exploded. When nations printed, markets rose, but the middle class fell. The illusion of prosperity hit a deeper reality. The wealth wasn't being created, it was being transferred. Today, printing money no longer requires presses. It takes a keyboard. Since 2008, the world's central banks have created over $40 trillion in new currency. In 2020 alone, during the pandemic, more than 20% of all US dollars in existence were created within a single year. Governments called it rescue. It said it was to save the economy. And yet, despite the trillions, citizens are struggling more than ever. Wages can't keep up with prices. Housing has become unaffordable, and inflation quietly taxes everyone without passing a law. Because when governments print money, they aren't creating wealth. They're diluting it. The more currency that exists, the less each unit is worth. Your savings lose power, your work buys less, your future costs more. Meanwhile, the owners of financial assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, benefit most. The wealth gap grows not because of effort or innovation, but because of proximity to printed money. Politicians and economists know this system is unsustainable, but they can't stop it because the entire economy now depends on the illusion. If central banks stop printing, the markets crash. If governments stop borrowing, unemployment spikes. If interest rates rise too much, the debt becomes impossible to repay. The system can't reverse. It can only expand until it breaks. That's why every financial crisis from 2008 to 2020 has been met with the same solution: print more, spend more, borrow more. The irony. Every rescue makes the next collapse even worse. The silent truth of modern economics is this: the wealth of nations now depends on the poverty of their people. We've seen this before, just with different names. Rome debased silver. Weimar Germany printed paper. Zimbabwe printed trillions. And now advanced nations print digitally, hiding inflation behind complex statistics. Yet the pattern is always the same: short-term comfort, long-term decay. A widening gap between the rulers and the ruled. When nations print, citizens pay, not through taxes, but through lost purchasing power, higher costs, and endless debt. Printing is not progress. It's a quiet form of theft. So what do we learn from all this? First, printing money doesn't create wealth, it redistributes it. The closer you are to the printer, the richer you get. Second, the illusion of prosperity is sustained only by faith. Once trust in currency breaks, collapse follows every time. Third, real wealth comes not from what's printed, but from what's produced: skills, innovation, and tangible value. We now live in a world where every government is addicted to money creation, and every citizen is trapped inside the consequences. The next time a nation promises growth through printing, remember, they're not creating wealth. They're borrowing it from your future. The question is no longer if this cycle ends, but when. If this video helped you see beyond the illusion of printed wealth, don't let the story stop here. Share it, question it, and dig deeper into how money truly works. Because the system depends on your ignorance. The more you understand it, the harder it becomes for them to hide it. Subscribe for more deep dives into the history, paradoxes, and hidden systems that shape the global economy.